Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today what we're going to talk about are the best exercises for each individual muscle group. So obviously with this, there's going to be a fair bit of variance. We're obviously going to be talking more about this from a sort of fat loss, muscle growth, hypertrophy perspective, but we are going to probably talk about a few other things in terms of, range of motion, and different people will fit different machines, mobility, all those sort of things as well. But I think a really good area to start, Liam, is that obviously we're going to go through this list, right? But just because we say like one exercise is good for muscle growth or whatever, I think the main principle that we still need to understand is that you still need to be training close to failure.
Yeah, I would say so. At least one RIR, which for people that don't know means rep in reserve. So as close to failure as possible, or one rep in reserve, and you should be all sweet with a multitude of the exercises we're going to list. But I would also say, just quickly on people's body mechanics, any exercise that we list, we're talking from obviously personal experience and all our programming with our clients and then all the research that we've looked at. But hey, it might be different for you. It might work really well for you, one exercise that some people think's absolutely dog shit.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, because a lot of people will straight away, before we get into this list, be like, okay, this is the list. This is just, I'm going to populate my exercises and my program with this list, and that's going to be the magic pill.
Yep.
Obviously training plays a part, but like we said, past podcasts that, nutrition, recovery, all these things are going to play just as much of a part, obviously as the training and as the intensity, but we'll get sort of stuck in. So I think the first one I'm going to go through is every bloke's favorite chest. What are your sort of, favorite chest exercises, and why is that the case?
I would actually say the barbell incline bench press. I think it's overall the best exercise, not only to develop your chest, but in terms of like a pushing movement, it carries over into so many other lifts and is classified as a compound, at least I would say. I find the barbell incline bench press, specifically for chest, to be the best.
Yeah, I find, again, no issue with bench or incline bench. I actually found, probably recently, my coach Dave Marsh has put me on there. It's some sort of cable chest fly, even seated, almost like a cable chest press with the cables. Obviously, if you've got like a converging cable chest press, that's probably ideal, like a machine. And for those who don't know what converging means, basically means like driving inwards. So like imagine your hand's out at 9 degrees and it's driving sort of in across your chest, sort of mimicking what the cable can do. So if you're setting that up, that could be really, really useful. And I find, not just from obviously muscle growth and stretch and getting the most sort of tension under load perspective, but from more of a scapular movement perspective, it's quite good as well, because like you said, if you're just incline or barbell benching the whole time, your scapula doesn't get a lot of movement. And that, might not be as optimal for hypertrophy, say, but, in future phases when the shoulders start getting jammed up and the scapula can't move, that's probably going to limit your muscle growth, potentially a little bit longer down the track.
But then I could also say that in a barbell, when you're inclined on whatever degrees, if it's 90, 45, whatever you choose, you actually have your diaphragm open a little bit more, whereas you don't necessarily have that on a chest fly. Sometimes people, when they're really trying to push forward and come forward, they start to sort of turn a little bit in. So this is why we go through these different exercises and explain the different ones, because what I find works best for me, Josh will find something different. And we're definitely going to agree that they're both great exercises, but there may be polar opposite counterpoints, and everyone's different.
Yeah, and I think going back to that, it was less of a fly, more of sort of like a press. So imagine you were setting up a machine press, but you were setting up as a cable. The fly a little bit different. Again,
it's the same thing to me once it's set up on the cables.
Yeah,
to be honest,
similar. Well, obviously, fly's going to be opening out a little bit wider, but again, that sort of goes to another exercise, which is the chest fly. So performed correctly, it's definitely another fantastic exercise for the chest. Like if I had sort of three, I guess like, what would you call it? Like a mid-range, a lengthened and a shortened movement. Like I would probably go for, chest fly as more of a lengthened pec movement. I'd probably go for like a standing chest press, but like, pushed right forward on the cable. So it's really hard towards that shortening position. And then like something like a bench press or a dumbbell press is probably your best bet in that sort of, lengthened to mid-range. Of course, we know exercises, they're not going to specifically be mid, short or lengthened. A lot of them sort of teeter on, one or two of those areas as well. So we've just got the dog here.
Sorry, if anyone can see
on YouTube, Pablo's going absolutely mental here.
She's currently going crazy, tearing up the bed.
So if you ever hear her, yeah, apologies in advance. But if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to sort of see her antics. I think, yeah, dips is probably the only other one I'd mention, especially as like a chest focused dip. So really sort of like that for, I guess, like people say like upper, lower chest, all that sort of thing. It's going to be a bit of lower chest, but it's still probably going to be, that sort of sternal pec. But really focusing when you're doing a dip, instead of obviously being nice and tall, obviously trying to focus on really driving that chest forward and driving those elbows back and out, I find really, really helps, provided you have the shoulder mobility and scapular movement to do so. So if someone doesn't have that, it generally tells me that they need to get their shoulder blades moving, for example.
Well, I actually hate dips from a perspective of my wrists take a lot of the tension, more like way more than like my chest or anything like that. So I find I can't progress on them just purely from a grip and wrist perspective, takes too much of the load. I much prefer a machine sort of incline press or just a machine neutral press where the handles actually come inward.
Yeah, converge.
I find that feels absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think if you're going to simplify it, it's like some sort of converging machine press for your sternal pec, and then some sort of fly movement. Like really takes care of a lot. And then again, you can add something in like an incline barbell or something to hit that upper chest if needed. But
well, I tend to actually stay away from the dumbbells purely from a setup perspective and a fatigue perspective. Yes, a dumbbell flat bench press could be amazing to go to failure on, and so could an incline. But setting it up, and if you don't have a spotter with you, you can lose so much of the strength on that first rep trying to get it up. I find that machines just work way better for that.
Yeah. It's really interesting because it's like, say, for example, we take a dumbbell press, like you can probably get deeper in that stretch, right? But it's like the trade-off is, you might not be able to push to failure. It might be harder to set up, harder to do by yourself. So, like I said, there's going to be pros and cons of every sort of exercise we do. But I think that's a really good summation of sort of the best chest exercises we find out there. What about back? How do you find that when you train back?
Weighted pull-ups.
Interesting.
I think weighted pull-ups, whether it be a close grip, hammer grip, neutral grip, wide grip, I think weighted pull-ups for building your back are honestly the king.
I think, it's one of those ones where, of course, you need the strength to be able to do them. But at the same time, if you can get into those sort of heavy rep ranges, that probably feels awesome as well, putting 20, 30, 40 kilos on you and pulling your body weight up on top of that.
People look at you differently when you're chaining up. You've got like a 20 kilo kettlebell or whatever, and you're just repping out reps. You feel amazing.
Yeah, I think, like I said, and pretty much going to pull up, a lat pull down obviously is going to be a fantastic option as well. So that is generally where, if someone's looking to build some muscle, I would obviously start them on there until they're strong enough to probably, I'd say, at least do 3 to 5 pull ups themselves. Then they can start probably progressing to that, or using the assisted pull up machine, which can be really, really useful. But it's funny, I find with most assisted pull ups, there gets to a point where it's almost like you get to maybe 19 kilos of resistance, and it gets to the point where it's like, I may as well just start doing pull-ups rather than trying to get to because then the seat doesn't actually come up with you the whole way, which is kind of the whole point of assisting you to that sort of last position.
I'd agree.
Single arm pull down, I know they're sort of like all the rage with, that sort of, cast style pull down at that sort of 45, 60 degree angle. Obviously with them as well, I think really good for that lengthened lat as well. But to really simplify it, a sort of pull down movement or pull up movement and a sort of rowing movement are going to be really all you need. And the sort of variations though, so whether that's dumbbell, barbell, using a cable, using machines, they're all going to be really useful.
Honestly, I rarely program rows now just because people can really fuck it up when it comes to like their lower back or certain positioning, and the cheating that comes into play, especially when you're doing unilateral dumbbell rows. It's like someone can go really heavy on their right arm, and then their left arm, because of fatigue, it can just go completely out of the window, that set. So honestly, I do like to do things a lot more like cable and machine based for back, but at the same time, some free weight and some free barbell stuff can be good.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it comes down to programming as well. Like if you've got heaps of heavy bent over rows and things where your lower back has to support yourself, and then you go on a leg day a day or two later and you're doing RDLs and squats, and then it's okay, a lot of shear loading, a lot of compressive forces on that back. So that's where programming does come into play, where you'll start piecing these things together and knowing where to place them to sort of reduce the load if you're making your own programs or doing things like that. But going back to the back, I think any sort of machine row I find is quite good. Generally, you'll just have to find one that just works for you, if that makes sense. You'll know if it works for you. And one thing I will add is a lot of people, when they do their rows, will just want to like let their chest like cave in and really drop down to try and get like extra range. And when you're trying to train your sort of upper mid back, lower traps, rhomboids, those sort of things, you really want to keep that chest tall and sort of let those shoulder blades wrap around. But once they have, like, you don't need to then go any further down. And then driving back, and a lot of the clients that I've trained that way, where they're used to like getting a sort of deep stretch through their lat, they're like, oh, I've never felt my mid back like that. Obviously, if we're doing a row, leaning forward a bit more is going to help shorten and lengthen the lat a little bit more. But if you're looking at more of that upper back, mid back thickness, then keeping nice and tall, keeping really nice and rigid, and focusing on squeezing that mid back is going to be your best bet.
Yeah, it also depends on what machine they're on. Like if it's got like a chest support where you're sort of digging yourself into, so that and free weight, there is a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah,
but
I think it's good to use both, because sometimes you want, again, your core's not going to get a crazy workout while you're doing a seated row that's not chest supported, but it's still forcing you to keep yourself upright. You still have to keep yourself in check. And then, of course, there's times you can just go, okay, got the chest support. I'm still pushing in, but I'm ready to really, really help push, those sets to failure or very close to as well. Anything else for back?
No, that actually covers it.
Yeah, I think it covers it pretty well. Only other thing I'll mention with back is like, letting things rotate. So like, let's say you're doing a pull down and that, if you're trying to get some more movement through like your scaps and things like that, instead of trying to like crunch in, I see a lot of people do that sort of crunch in.
Elbow to the lat.
Yeah, elbow to the lat, which is fantastic. But if your actual body crunches with it, the problem is it's going to just basically work into your oblique. So it's going to feel like a lat contraction.
Trap.
Exactly. And you're going to really drive into that position. So on the eccentric of like, say, a single arm, any sort of single arm pull down, I'd actually encourage people to reach and crunch into the other side. So that's going to just help lengthen that scapula and get a bit more movement through the shoulder blade there. And then coming back, to neutral as opposed to crunching in, I find is a really, really good way to just get someone's shoulder blades moving again, especially if they're doing a lot of, shoulders back and down movements and a lot of pressing as well. Yeah. Shoulders. Well, that leads us quite well into shoulders. What do you think shoulder-wise? Oh, Pablo just sneezed. Is probably, what do you say your top 3 shoulder exercises are?
I've got a top 3. Recently, I've actually just gotten into the wide grip behind the barbell neck press. Behind the neck barbell press. And I found it's actually amazing. I used to be just complete closer grip overhead press for shoulders mainly. That was like my go-to staple, but I found the behind the neck barbell press, when done safely, and yes, it is a safe exercise, has actually felt absolutely amazing. The other 2 would be a machine lateral raise, purely from a stability perspective, like throwing around, dumbbells, the heavier you get, the more everything else comes to play. With the machine, it just keeps everything stable, you're locked in, and it's just targeting those middle delts and upper traps really well. And then I found lastly is just honestly a machine shoulder press. And one little hack I've had for that lately is not to grip it all the way over, is to sort of like go under the machine like that. And similar to like how people use hook grips with just their thumbs over, just take your thumbs out and push up straight there. And I found just from hitting literally all heads of the delt, like you can literally feel all of them working as you're pressing up. Yeah. And the stability of the machine just takes you through that range of motion.
I think shoulders is always an interesting one, because a lot of people, when they do shoulders, think they're working their shoulders, but they're working their traps.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, like you said, when you're doing a lateral raise, that's probably the main issue that people have, is they'll go, I just feel like all trap.
Or elbow.
Or elbow, exactly. So I think for a lot of people, if you can think of the cue, like drive your hands out to the walls, but still just letting your traps do what they need to do, because they're still going to work and stabilize as you get to the top of the movement. So if you're trying to like pull them down and keep them out of it as you're trying to, reach, your scapula and things aren't going to be able to move, and you're not going to be able to actually shorten your mid delt in that position as well. But my sort of top 3 would be, I'd say, a behind the body sort of cable lateral. I quite like that for getting some lengthened cable. It's got to be set up properly, of course, but it'll sort of go behind and get you a really nice stretch, and then you can sort of reach out at more of, instead of a directly out in front or directly out to the side, more of a sort of 60 to 75 degree angle out.
Do you find there's a really short progression there though?
For sure.
It's really hard to progress on them.
It's one of those ones where, again, when you're working, like, because we're generally speaking, this is going to be more of your lateral delt, because it's a smaller muscle group. Definitely, like, I'm adding maybe a rep at a time.
Yeah.
Over the course of that. But of course, If you've got the cable, it has the tension the whole time, you know. So obviously there's still going to be harder and easier parts, but it's going to keep more tension on the delt. Whereas in like a dumbbell one, nothing wrong with the dumbbell lateral raise at all. Really good to hit that shortened position at the top, but there's just absolutely zero tension at the bottom. So it does make it almost good as a teaching tool to teach people to keep their delts on, if that makes sense. But again, any sort of variation is going to be good. And then, like you said, just some sort of either overhead press, dumbbell, barbell, military, or a machine is going to cover all your bases there. The only other one I'd recommend is obviously you'll get a lot of rear delt with your rowing patterns, especially with arms a bit sort of higher, 45 to 9 degrees, but some sort of rear delt fly or a cable rear delt fly just to sort of help that position, I find is quite good. Because a lot of people generally are very underdeveloped in their rear delts as well, because their traps generally take over.
I found for rear delts, I used to do like the reverse pec deck, but I found the best one, honestly, is, and it does require extra accessories, but you need lifting cuffs, and you set up the cable machine, and you do sort of like a cross backwards fly, and I found that's actually amazing.
I think a good mention while I'm talking about cables is like a Y raise, like a cable Y raise seated, because that's really good. Even again, going back to the scapula again, but just letting those shoulders open up and move whilst being able to shorten your shoulders at the top of that movement, I think is really good and could be really useful at like the start of an upper body day or something like that, to sort of get everything moving effectively before you go into heavy pressing or pulling or whatever it is as well. But I think that sort of covers shoulders.
Yeah, that covers shoulders.
Yeah, sweet. Hammies, this would be a good one.
My favourite for hammies is RDLs by far. Yeah, mainly, stiff-legged deadlifts for people that don't know. We're talking Romanian deadlifts. But for hamstrings, that's by far my favourite. Yeah,
I think when you talk about the short and lengthened positions, especially when we're talking hammies, generally speaking, you're going to get a lot of growth from that lengthened position. So obviously with a lot of my clients, obviously RDL, if someone's got like some back issues or for whatever reason they can't do that, the seated hamstring curl, really, really good as well. Both of them are going to work that lengthened position really, really effectively. So I really rate the seated one.
I only mention that though because not all gyms have a seated leg curl, unfortunately. Like a lot of them have the lying hamstring curl, but I find a lot of people get their lower back involved too much. The seated hamstring curl is an amazing machine, and I would have put it on my list, but my gym just purely doesn't have it.
Yeah, I think like going back to the lying one, obviously. Yeah, that's probably just about the only one that you're going to really be able to shorten those hamstrings, unless you were maybe doing like the Swiss ball where you're like going up into a glute bridge and then curling in. That's probably the only other shortening hamstring exercise. But I really like them for clients, provided, like you said, they're doing it properly. I think for the initiation of the movement is that a lot of people will initiate by extending their lower back straight away. So as long as you're mindful of that, there is going to be some movement through the pelvis. So there will be some extension towards the top of the movement. But if you can think, okay, I'm just trying to keep a bit of tension in my core, drive my hips into the pad as I'm driving the heels to the bum, then that's a really good sort of indication to know, like, you're just bending your knee, getting that squeeze, you feel the hamstring. You don't need to go all the way to touch your bum. As soon as you feel your hamstring fully shortened, then you can start resisting and bringing it back. Only other exercise that I would say would be a really good one for the hamstrings would be like a back extension glute ham raise. Just because of that, again, you're going to get a really good stretch in that position. Obviously, you're going to get some glute out of that as well, and we'll still talk about glutes, but that's probably a really good one. The one I'd almost like not stay away from, but just be wary of are Nordics.
I think Nordic hams.
I think they're quite a good exercise, but you also need to be quite strong to do them. So you can do some assisted ones, but like just sort of eccentrically loading the hamstrings. Like if that was the only hamstring exercise you're doing, you're just missing out on a lot of gains, basically.
Would you say, like, get people to do half the movement on the eccentric, then just let themselves go, or do it all the way back up?
It just depends how strong they are, I think, at the end of the day. If you can go back up and back down, awesome. Then
it looks good for Instagram.
I would probably say that if you're strong enough to go up and back down, that's probably when you can start programming them. But if it's just eccentric, again, depends on why you're doing them, etc. For hypertrophy, probably not great. But for some sort of other movement, or if you're maybe a runner or something like that, it could be a bit more useful to potentially, bulletproof the hamstrings. Even though it's not really something I believe in, bulletproofing. Very hard to do, and there's a lot of other stuff that sort of...
Calm down, Joel Seedman.
Yes, old mate Joel. Tangent. He said that his 90-degree method is the best because, and then he said because of God, like he used
Well, no,
God as like his study.
God told
God
him
told him in
to
a dream.
pursue this PDF
Yeah,
that he did.
and
then,
everyone's like, well, I've got the same PDF as you, mate. Like it's literally wrong.
yeah.
Crazy. Anyway, people on the internet. Quads. Let's go through them.
Yeah, I've got top two. One, if the gym has it, is a machine hack squat. And then the other one's a leg extension.
Yeah.
I think they're the two best for quads.
I think, yeah, as well, like throwing in a leg press there, still really good for that sort of mid-range. But yeah, like your leg extension is going to be, you're just about pure shortened movement.
Yep.
Really, really good. I like to program if I'm doing quads, for example, or, in that, I like to pre-fatigue that shortened position first. That's, again, if you're getting more intermediate and advanced, that stuff starts making a little bit more of a difference.
Yeah.
But again, shit happens. Sometimes there's someone on there for half an hour and there's not much you can do about it. So
On their phone.
Yeah, on their phone. Yeah. So yeah, some sort of hack or pendulum are probably your best ones in that length of position. Some sort of deep squat where you can get that knee right over the toe. Front foot elevated split squat, driving that knee over the toe. Bulgarians obviously can be really useful as well. But just pretty much if you think you want to shorten the quad and then get the knee over the toe.
I will say you can lengthen the quad on a machine leg extension if you just push the chair all the way back. It can really help.
Yeah, I've got a gripe with that.
Do you?
Yeah, it's only because I see people like there's like all these things now where get the pad, get a bit of extra range of motion, and if the leg extension is the only exercise you have access to, then for sure. But I'm like, if you're already hitting, some sort of pendulum hack squat, split squat, which most people have access to, it's like, what's the point then in changing your shortened movement to make it more lengthened?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
No, it does.
So it's like, that's sometimes where I sit there with people, structure is everything. And again, it depends on your programming. If you don't have anything else in there and that's all you have access to, awesome. I'd do probably a shortened one and then, lean back and then potentially do a set or two of the lengthened ones as well. But I think it comes back to, for me, like it's a shortened movement unless it's a very specific circumstance or situation, I would say.
Sweet.
Easy. All right, glutes.
Glutes, man, I would say just probably the machine hip thrust.
Yeah.
Yeah, or a Smith machine hip thrust.
Yeah. Thrust is a must.
Yeah, barbell's good. Like a hack for a barbell hip thrust is I find if people actually get the decline bench and sort of like lean back and then slide the barbell under their hips and use that, I found that works really well.
Yep.
But again, you can just do it on the Smith machine as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely used to use that a lot with clients, but now that we have a glute drive, makes life a lot easier. So any sort of shortened glute stuff at the top, fantastic. So I would strongly recommend if you are looking to grow your glutes, that pretty much needs to be a staple, some sort, whether it's dumbbell, barbell, machine. The other one I'd recommend is obviously a cable kickback. Obviously I know for guys, they're probably a bit like, oh, do I want to jump into a cable kickback? But you can use a machine version of that as well. Some gyms have that.
I was going to say some gyms do have the machine version and it's actually really good. You just hold the handles and just pretty much.
I think
it's like a reverse leg press, pretty much. Yeah.
They're really good for that glute. Like while we're on there, like a sort of a leg press, maybe like a single leg press. I find on the 90-degree leg press, really good if you get your leg up a bit higher, really focus on bending through the hip. That can really get a really nice glute stretch as well. But then it goes back down to some sort of RDL. You're going to really get some lengthened glute or some sort of squat, some sort of almost like a sumo position, or getting into that squat is really going to help you find that sort of lengthened glute as well. Those would probably be, I'd say, your staple glute exercises. Any others to add?
Not for glutes, no.
Cool. Calves.
Interesting.
Calves are interesting because a lot of the researchers now come out to say they, some muscles benefit from stretch and this, that, but calves are one that apparently people are really looking for a deep stretch now. So my favorite is the leg press, like the 90-degree leg press, the calf raise. So really getting a really deep stretch under there and then pushing back and then even potentially doing a few partials. Again, how you actually track that is up to you, but just making sure you're still progressively overloading them. And then you've got obviously your standing and your seated calves.
Well, I prefer the neutral leg press and actually holding like the bottom stretch for like 3 to 5 seconds and then pushing up. I find that works really well. But, a lot of people with calves, it's like there's a gastroc and then there's a soleus. And people think like, okay, if standing stretches the soleus, seating works the gastroc. It's like, yes, you do need to work both, but you're pretty much going to hit both when you're doing each exercise.
Yeah.
Like one doesn't hit more than the other.
Yeah, I would say anything standing or on like the leg press with the straight leg is going to do a lot more for your calf than the seated position. So like if you're looking at overall calf strength, of course you still want to incorporate some seated, but standing is going to be your best bet there. Take her off or she's going to get into the microphone.
Yeah. She's
Get out of the
getting
microphone.
restless. Yeah. For those
so-
watching, Pablo's getting.
Pablo's a bit restless now, so we're just going to make sure
It's the
she's
first
all
time
good.
at my house in a while, so she gets excited.
No, all right, she's good now. Yeah, that's really all we need to worry about calves. I think if you can go as deep as you can into the stretch, pause for a second or two, and then drive up and take that really close to failure, that'll sort of get you all you need out of them. Biceps.
Biceps, yep. So we're doing top 3 again.
Yeah, if you want, give it a top 3.
Because I will say a lot of people neglect the biceps brachii. That's a big one, which for a lot of people that don't realize, like that's kind of like your brachialis is like your forearm, but it's like connects up to your bicep. And a lot of people forget about that exercise. They just think about supinated stuff. So I would actually say a reverse easy bar curl becomes a staple to train that. In terms of just general biceps, I honestly can't go past a straight barbell bicep curl. For me, it just feels absolutely amazing. And then also a machine preacher curl.
Yeah, cool. I think those are really good options. Short, lengthen, mid range.
Yep.
I think for me, like one thing I do like using is cable. So any sort of cable bicep curl is really beneficial. The only issue that some people will have is they may get elbow issues and things. So even just finding something that works for you, like I said, the easy bar, maybe turned in or turned out for other people, someone might find just a bit more comfortable. Again, if you're more comfortable, you're probably going to push closer to failure there. Other one I'd mention is some sort of incline dumbbell curl, which I like as well, provided people can get into that position. And then some sort of dumbbell spider curl as well. If you're not sure what a dumbbell spider curl is, just YouTube it. You'll look, but basically you'll be lying on a bench and the resistance is all at the bottom. And it gets really hard as you're getting towards that top shortened position.
Yep.
And single arm, double arm, I really like using cables, single arm. I find especially on like the preacher curl machine, because it's sort of hard depending on how big your shoulders are to sort of line that bicep, wrist and elbow up perfectly. Sort of turning away a little bit, I find on the single arm stuff is really, really useful as well. So if you're someone who feels like, the joints just aren't quite working properly, give a single arm cable curl or a single arm preacher curl on the machine a go. And I think by turning away and lining it up, that just really helps get sort of the most out of that bicep, I'd say.
I will say, like, a bit of a side tangent, as you mentioned with the joints there, like elbow pain and joint pain and stuff, it's like you still need to train. Like you still need to work around it and get strong. Like just completely stopping an exercise because of a tiny bit of pain, you can always change the angle or work your way around it.
Yeah, I think grip's a big one as well. Like, for example, I'm dealing with some just elbow issue at the moment. And it's just more, if I go into the wide grip pronated pull-ups, struggling, but as soon as I go more into a neutral grip, it just eases that tension straight away. So a lot of my curling now is going to be more in that neutral position, or potentially I'm even experimenting with like using cuffs to curl and stuff like that as well, just to take some stress away from the whole forearm and arm. Is it 100% ideal for hypertrophy? Probably not as much, but if it's between that and not training, for example, then I'm always going to be able to do that. And the only other one I mentioned is some sort of dumbbell or rope hammer curl. Just hit the brachioradialis, which is that sort of outer part of your bicep as well. Obviously doesn't take up as much of the arm, but definitely underdeveloped in most people, I would say, and still needs to be a staple in your programming. Of course, you're going to get a bit of that with the easy bar reverse curls, like you talked about as well.
Yeah.
Last one, triceps.
Triceps, top 3. Oh, it's so hard because I love so many. I would say a straight bar cable push down, I think is absolutely amazing. I've recently been really loving an easy bar French press when you set it up correctly, which is, for those who don't know, it's like an overhead extension. But then again, you could just set up the same sort of easy bar attachment and then just do overhead triceps. So it's probably the same thing. And only one last. Machine dips.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I was tossing between that and close grip bench press, but I don't think close grip bench press trains all the heads, whereas I think a machine dip you'd get more bang for your buck.
Yeah. I think, like I said, probably majoring in the minors when we talk about that, because it's like they're both going to all work to some degree. But that's just, comes down to personal preference. With the French press, like, do you find like it's almost like a skull crusher, but you also extend back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I think that's a really good one. It's going to hit all three heads really well.
What I do is so there's the preacher machine, and I actually sit backwards on it. So your back's supported, but your neck's not supported. So you can actually go all the way back and then up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's like you're stable, which stability is huge for an exercise, especially when you're going overhead. But you can still get that full range of motion, and then your triceps literally all the way from the long head, get all that mechanical tension, and you drive it up.
Yeah, I've done very similar, like with a dumbbell, almost like a dumbbell pullover variation where the elbow bends, but the shoulder also extends back at the same time. And when you get it right, it does take a while to get right with the shoulder mechanics, but once it does, it really does feel really nice, really smooth, and really hits that lengthened tricep, especially really hard. And then obviously, as you're driving back up, gets the other heads as well. So I find a cross cable extension, you got two cables opening out, I find is a really, really good one. But again, like my stuff is always more built around, fixing up the elbow pain and shoulder and that sort of movement. But yeah, I do love the machine dips as well. Only other one I'd say is maybe like a single arm overhead. And I'd say this from obviously a good perspective of hitting your tricep and feeling it, but also just from a shoulder stability and function standpoint. The further you can get that elbow up to the sky, the easier that's going to be to get it overhead, obviously get more of a stretch. And eventually that's going to obviously open up your shoulder joint as well. So say hello, Pablo.
She wants to hop off.
Yeah, I know.
She really does.
She's had enough. So I think that would be a great place to leave it, guys.
There's one more we can touch on.
You reckon? What can we touch on?
Abs.
Oh, yes, true. Yeah. Sorry. Yep. We don't want to leave abs out. That's fair.
See? No, because I actually had someone reach out and talked about training abs and core. And look, I do think majority of the time it is a bit pointless because it gets trained and worked through so many other things. But if you want to specifically target it, I'll give you one, and that's a hanging leg raise. I honestly think hanging leg raise just targets everything you need when it comes to abs.
Yeah, I think the only, not disagreement I'll have, but I find for a lot of people, they're not strong enough to do them. So their hip flexors get involved a lot more than their abs. So I think some sort of cable crunch when done, again, correctly. And then once you can progress that, some sort of ab rollout, or even just like, we call it a McGill curl up, where one leg up, one leg down, and they crunch basically like you're trying to bring your head up to the sky as opposed to crunch in. I find those are really, really useful as well. So I think those, and even potentially some rotation oblique work, like some kneeling, cable rotations, I think can be really, really good as well. Get her off your microphone, or she's not going to hear anything. All right, sweet guys. I think that covers everything. Again, if you guys have any questions, through any of the exercises that we've recommended, or you're just not sure on anything, the links to obviously our Instagrams are below, so you can shoot us a DM or reply through the YouTube comments, or of course, contact us, whichever way you feel. But again, guys, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.